You're listening to the Wedding Biz Network, the voice of the creative entrepreneur.
Come on, y'all!
Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, and this is another episode of The Next Level, in which I have a guest co-host, and together we discuss the most recent interview and suss out a few key topics and help talk about them in ways that you can use to bring your own business to the next level. And before I introduce today's illustrious guest co-host, I want to first mention last week's interview, which was with Philip Carr, who calls himself an event architect and stylist. I love that term. He's out of Sydney, Australia. And on The Next Level, we had award-winning chef Michael Ranatisi as the guest co-host. So at this time, I want to introduce today's guest co-host, and that is Carrie Goldberg, who is the travel and weddings director at Harpers Bazaar, where she oversees all things bridal, weddings, and travel for Bazaar.com, and also in charge of content strategy and visuals for Bazaar's digital travel and wedding verticals. Carrie, it's so good to have you back again. Hello.
It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for doing this. And so today's interview, who we're going to talk about is ZAMEER KASSAM of ZAMEER KASSAM Fine Jewelry. In 2018, ZAMEER designed the Time's Up ring worn by Ashley Judd at the Oscars. And later that year, ZAMEER's designs were worn by the cast of Crazy Rich Asians at the global premiere in Singapore. And last year, ZAMEER was commissioned to celebrate the groundbreaking movie Black Panther by designing the Wakanda Forever ring worn by its lead actress Lupita Nyong'o throughout the awards season. So, Carrie, I was just thinking how funny it was near the beginning of the interview when I asked ZAMEER what one of his early memories are or were of jewelry. He said that when he was 11 or 12, he tried to sell $79 Mickey Mouse watches to his classmates at 11 or 12. I thought that was really funny.
I mean, I think it just shows equal parts creativity and also entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, I definitely wasn't trying to sell anything at the age of 11.
Right. Yeah.
And then perhaps, 11's a little old for a lemonade stand, but that's probably the closest I got. So I think that was just sort of a sign of things to come and hit in the arc of his career.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's so interesting how so many people who have been on the show that there was something in their childhood that connects to who they are today. But, one of the interesting pieces that came out of this interview is how he talked about his parents being refugees from South Africa. And so that story just permeates every part of his life and, leading to how for him, it's all about family and connecting in an emotional way.
Totally. I mean, it's so interesting. That was actually something even after years of knowing ZAMEER and wearing his pieces myself and spending time with him socially and at industry events, I actually did not even know that about him. So it was really interesting to learn all about his past, about his childhood, what got him from, his childhood growing up all the way through to his business right now. But I think that ZAMEER is a great example of somebody that's taken the art of storytelling and translated that into a really dynamic business.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's so interesting. Like, I had no idea that personally that jewelry could be approached in this way. I mean, I knew that there was customization in the market, but not in this way. And I remember in the interview, ZAMEER was saying how he had worked, I guess he had a finance and strategic development for a company in media because he was fascinated about stories. And that's where he continued to learn about this art of storytelling and how he felt that jewelry, as he started to go into his own business, felt that jewelry was moving more in mass consumption, in that kind of a way, and not nearly as personal, and thought that he could really make it a lot more creative and more of an experience. And you know a lot about that with him.
Totally. I mean, I think that is sort of one thing that people don't really realize about making, especially an engagement ring. I think that let's sort of focus on that for a second, because making jewelry and making high jewelry is a totally separate thing, which ZAMEER does as well. But I think in terms of making custom engagement rings, people don't tend to think about the fact that all engagement rings technically are one of a kind. No two diamonds are alike. Each diamond has its own classification, its own certification. And so every diamond is in and of itself unique. I think that yes, when you go into a jewelry store and you choose a setting, that setting could be worn by somebody else. While no two diamonds are alike, there are two settings that are alike. There are two designs that are alike, which is why you see so often when celebrity engagement rings come out, they become trends and a lot of people tend to mimic them, whether that was the Duchess of Cambridge's sapphire ring or Irina Shaykh's emerald ring or Kim Kardashian's like standalone cushion cut ring or emerald cut ring, I believe she has from Lorraine Schwartz. Any of those things, I think, become things that people tend to replicate, whereas ZAMEER really focuses on what's your story, what's in your jewelry box now, how can we add to that, and how can we add little things that are even just secret to you that you and your partner will know about forever and might not be so visible to somebody admiring the ring on your finger.
Yeah, I love how you're framing that. And as you know, he told some examples. I think one of the early ones was asking a friend of his how he met his fiance, and how ZAMEER, I thought brilliantly, pulled out a lot of the different elements of the story and manifested it in the ring. I want to say to listeners, if you haven't heard this interview, it's really fun to listen to the whole thing and get the details of what he's talking about. Again, I had no idea this was even possible.
Totally. And I think that ZAMEER really takes the idea of an engagement ring and makes it something that really is between, the two people in the relationship rather than between the wearer and every one of her followers on Instagram or every one of her friends. I mean, it's so common in our world when one gets engaged to put it immediately on Instagram, to call every single person and which is amazing. I mean, it's our natural inclination as human beings to have a community and want to celebrate the people that we love and to, congratulate the people that we love and ooh and ah over great things that happen to them. But I think that there is something really beautiful and unique about having something that is just yours, something that is between you and the person that gave you that ring. And I think that ZAMEER does a really good job of getting to know his couples so deeply that he can kind of come up with those ideas and really speak to somebody that most of the time he's never met. He's working with the person gifting the ring, not the person receiving it. And yet he's managed to kind of bridge that gap so seamlessly.
Yeah. And for whoever is sitting with him, telling the story, to have this ring design, they are so much more involved than just going to a storefront, and saying, hey, here's my budget. And here's, I know my, whoever they're giving it to, here's a cut I know they like. I mean, it's so much more, like you say, it's so much more personal. Do you wish you could be a fly on the wall listening to music industry pros like Clive Davis, Jerry Moss, and Edwin McCain? Well, check out my other podcast, The Music Makers, where you can hear great stories from some of the biggest music industry professionals around. You can find it on your cell phone's podcast app or at themusicmakers.com. Again, that's The Music Makers. And then there's also, as I mentioned in the introduction, that ZAMEER also basically told the story about the Time's Up moment, with the Oscars through with Ashley Judd, and telling a story about women in film through the ring, and there were also a couple other celebrities who he had done this for, and so to have it extend in that way is also really fascinating to me.
I mean, that's a really unique situation that he's managed to replicate multiple times. It's like finding a unicorn 3 times.
Right.
Dressing a celebrity for a red carpet, especially when it comes to jewelry and clothes, it's a lot of, these things are figured out. It's almost like a hurry up and wait. Things are figured out very far in advance with fittings, but a lot of the times key celebrities are sponsored by brands. A lot of the time those celebrities have partnerships with brands. And it's very hard to kind of go into that market without those relationships locked and loaded. And he's done a really cool job of tying his brand to really profound cultural moments in addition to really exciting red carpet moments. And that kind of speaks to his role as a storyteller and his role as being a part of a larger conversation than just the glitz and glam of fashion and jewelry.
Yeah. And boy, he clearly has quite a bit of passion and enthusiasm for what he does. I mean, that is so obvious, isn't it?
Totally. And I think that, even his talking about working with Ashley Judd on that ring or speaking about working on that, the ring for Black Panther, I think that being responsible for creating iconic pieces of jewelry to speak to iconic moments in our cultural conversation is something that feels so in line for him, but also something that we aren't seeing on the red carpet typically. So he really broached a topic that so few have had to. Typically, is this the best jewelry for this look? Or is this an iconic archival piece of jewelry? Sort of like when Lady Gaga wore that stunning Tiffany diamond on the red carpet. Those are the stories that we tend to write about when we're covering red carpets for Bazaar, for example. But I think that looking at a ring that took as long as it did to make in the custom process as ZAMEER's did, both for Ashley Judd and Lupita Nyong'o, I think it's just a really cool marriage of his storytelling skills and also keeping things current.
Can you say something about the rings that you wore?
Of his?
That's right, yeah.
I've never worn a ring of his, but ZAMEER has been really amazing at letting me wear some of his earrings to parties just for fun, just so that I get a sense of what it's like to wear a gorgeous set. And the fun part of it is I just kind of like tell him what I'm thinking about wearing. And he brought, to both times that I've worn something of his, he just brought 3 options for me to choose from. And we basically peeled off into a corner, decided together, and then kept the party going. So there definitely was a little less storytelling and a little bit more styling when I wore some of his pieces. But I think my favorite piece of his that I've ever worn was these really stunning geometric earrings that were diamond shapes, pave diamond earrings. And they were as long once they were in my ears, almost as long as my hair. So they were shoulder dusters, which is a really fun statement piece to wear. I was wearing a suit with like a really low neckline. So it was just like, it mimicked the look of that when I was wearing it, but it still felt like my personal style. He really thought about how I would want to feel rather than bringing something that was super glam or super over the top or super encrusted, because he knows me well enough to know that I tend to accessorize with a lot of layering and a lot of like sentimental pieces, but I'm not the girl that's going to go all out and wear like an old Hollywood glam look with a huge chandelier earring. So he had my back with that for sure.
Oh, I wish I could have seen all of that. Well, before we go, I want to bring up how, we were talking about how things are going during the pandemic, and he was talking about how his team is having to produce jewelry from home. But, it's interesting to me. I just kind of assumed with people having issues with finances and stuff like that and weddings being postponed that there wasn't as much going on, but he said that actually people are really realizing how much they appreciate each other more during this time and feeling more gratitude during the slowdown and wanting to recognize it with fine jewelry and how people would otherwise, and this is true, I suppose, they would otherwise be spending money on trips and things like that. And so there are still, he's getting a lot of custom orders for the idea of people telling someone how much they love them and having it last.
That does not surprise me at all. I think that right now, especially people that are planning on proposing, we're in the middle of wedding season. We've been in this pandemic gearing up for a time when people would normally be at weddings and people aren't gathering, and instead they're spending time with the people that they love and with couples that are sitting at home together, whether they're married or whether they are recently engaged or planning to get engaged. It's a time where people are really getting a sense of how they can't live with or whether they can't live without the person that they're with.
Right.
And I think that it would make perfect sense to me for a couple who'd been together and is married, or a couple that was on the precipice of getting engaged, that they would look at this time and go, wow, the world is in such a state right now. I can't imagine doing life without this person. And rather than give them something that is a throwaway, I want to give them something that withstands the test of time. That is an investment piece. And I think that also speaks to the idea of sustainability. I mean, at the end of the day, fine jewelry is one of the few things that most likely appreciates in value over time, is a great way to create an heirloom piece for your family. And I think that it makes perfect sense to me that as people are trying to figure out how to celebrate the people that they love and make people feel loved and appreciated, that they would invest in them and invest in their future together.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't have said that better myself. Well, Carrie, thank you again for coming on to help me with this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that people can find you. They can go to harpersbazaar.com/wedding, and you can find Carrie on Instagram in 2 ways. One of them is at Harpers Bazaar US. The other is at Carrie Lauren. And all of this is in the show notes at theweddingbiz.com. And as far as ZAMEER Kassam, you could find him at ZAMEERKassam.com. And spelling is all in the show notes. And his social media handles on Instagram is ZAMEER Kassam. And on Facebook, it is ZK Fine Jewelry. And I want to urge everyone to check out theweddingbiz.com, where you could subscribe to the show, get automatic notifications. And I want to mention before we go, Carrie, I got to mention you very soon are going to be featured again on the show. I can't wait to just have our own conversation.
I'm looking forward to it too. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So next week's episode is with Abby Matheson, wonderful award-winning filmmaker. Really interesting conversation, different. So I urge you to check in then, and we'll catch you next week on The Wedding Biz.